So this is kind of going hand in hand with that one, but it's basically all the road work that a lot of fighters are doing. And, you know, from experience, you know, I've been down that road as well where, you know, I've been told and I've got to do it. I've got to do sort of 8 to 10K runs a day. You know, this comes from straight out of Thailand. If you're not running 8 or 10K a day, then you don't fight. They don't even train you to fight. So pretty much what I'm doing to counter this is just basically getting their road work in for the active recovery. So I'm keeping them a heart rate to stick to, which is just using the 180 method, and then pretty much just keeping them that to stick to, you know, 2 or 3 times a week, depending on where they are in their training, what period they're in. Yeah, and then they're getting their kind of long distance runs in, more just kind of sticking to the heart rate, sticking to a certain time depending on where they are in training, and then they're just looking to kind of improve that distance, and that's where you can see the improvement in aerobic capacity. Improve that distance with sticking to that time and the heart rate as well. But a lot of guys are just doing, you know, they're doing sort of 8 to 10K a day out there, as well as, you know, maybe an hour of strength and conditioning 3 times a week, as well as 2 or 3 hours of skills work as well. Just so much breakdown, so much impact on the body. No strategy. No strategy, so much impact on the body, and, you know, you're just getting too many injuries from it. But yeah, coming from a Muay Thai background, training a few Muay Thai fighters, that's just kind of standard practice. You know, yeah. So, what are your views on that?
Well, I would just pose a question. You know, from my experience, there's so many fighters that have injuries, they have structural anomalies that make, you know, long distance running in particular just, you know, too uncomfortable, painful, you know, the risk of injury goes up. There's so much damage to the joints, cumulative damage to the joints. What would you suggest are some of the different methods or machines or equipment you can use to stimulate that same aerobic effect as those long, slow runs?
Yeah, just pretty much anything without the loading. You know, so I'm a massive fan of the rowing machine. Mm-hmm. I think that's absolutely awesome. You know, it gets a lot of leg drive using pretty much the whole body as well. But yeah, you know, you can do it with anything without impact. So any sort of, you know, you've even got like the what's it called, the cross trainer, all that sort of stuff. You know, like anything like
elliptical
that.
Kind of cross
elliptical.
Trainer.
Sorry, yeah. You know, you got the cycle ergo. You can pretty much use anything that hasn't got the impact that you keep into that heart rate with.
Yep.
Is going to get the same sort of impact. But yeah, a lot of the thing with a lot of fighters is, you know, a lot of guys, especially in the amateur level, they see the pros do it. They see the pros training with injuries, through injuries, all that sort of stuff, and they kind of think, you know, if I'm not injured, I'm not really training hard enough or something like that, you know, which is obviously a completely wrong frame of mind to be in. But a lot of fighters are going, you know, even at the top level, I'm sure you agree, Phil, a lot of fighters are going into fights injured. You know, and so, you know, you get that transfer into the amateur level or the, you know, the kind of semi-pro level, and they're like, you know, if I'm not injured, I'm not training hard enough.
The one thing that I do see now is that, you know, when you get to a higher level with all the guys that are veterans, they do know how to actually back it down a lot better than the amateurs and the up and coming guys and the regional guys. You know, we do have a couple of very good amateurs in the gym. And they just train all the fucking time because they feel like that's what they need to do and that's what they need to do to get better. And, you know, we relay that over to them as much as we can. Yeah, they do need to understand. They do need to train their skill, and that's something that they got to hone in on because they're just not skillful enough yet. And that's why they're at the level right now that they're at. But at the same time, overdoing it is just as bad as not doing enough. Mm-hmm. So we got to make sure that we're relaying that over to the young guys and girls that are in the sport, so you can develop that way of thinking beforehand. It's just like, you know, as a parent, I try to make sure that I relay over good habits first and foremost as my kids are young, so that when they get older, they don't develop the bad habits, and it's just second nature. So it's the same concept when you have the amateurs, the young kids, you know, coming up, because once they get older, you don't want them to have that. The good thing about it is that we are getting smarter as a sport, and people are coming in the sport smarter. You know, as far as before, where it's more barbaric in a sense, and it's kind of just go mentality. And now we are being a little bit more strategic with our approaches. So it's good.
Yeah, a lot of it comes from load monitoring as well. You know, like, overtraining is a real thing, obviously. So, we've got to make sure we're not overtraining athletes. If we're overtraining anyone, then, that's adaptations that you're never going to get back. So it's a serious thing. So if anyone's going to that sort of point, obviously it's a very bad point to be on. You're close to passing out every day. You're not going to be sleeping. You're not going to be getting any recovery. You're pretty much near, it's a near fatal condition. So it's a very bad thing. And, the main thing is you kind of, as a protective thing from your body, from a physiological point of view, you're never going to be able to get to your fitness levels or your strength levels or your power levels that you were before you've ever overtrained. So you've got overreaching, which is, sort of 2 to 3 weeks. That's pretty much what every good S&C coach should be doing with their athletes anyway. But if you're holding that sort of intensity for a long time, then you're going to be overtraining. And most of the common markers for overtraining, as soon as you're reaching them, it's pretty much too late already. So like a lot of people are testing heart rate for their overtraining, all that sort of stuff. If your heart rate's constantly up that high, or your recovery or your resting heart rate's constantly up that high, then chances are it's a little bit too late already. Same with sleep. If you're not sleeping enough, it's too late already. So you've really got to kind of keep track of it, and you've got to make sure, this goes back to having a plan, and making sure you're always sticking to that plan no matter what.
It's funny that you say that, because we're talking about means of technology to help with indication of overtraining, and we can go into the HRV thing. We can go in, obviously we've been using Omega Wave a lot lately now, and I think that that's something that is beneficial for us, because it gives us an opportunity, one, to really see what's going on inside the body of an individual. And then it also, from a psychological standpoint, I'm not just the one being the bad guy. The technology is actually telling us that now. So with it, with the Omega Wave, it's going to measure out HRV, but it also does measure out your central nervous system fatigue. So now I can correlate the training program around what's going on with their body, instead of just being like, fuck, man, we don't feel good. All right, take the day off. Because obviously we don't want to totally take the day off unless it's needed, right? Unless it's totally needed. And I understand that sometimes that may happen, especially getting into camp. But, I want to make sure that these guys, one, are psychologically ready. So at the end of the day, as long as we're doing something that's not going to put them in a bad position, whatever the case may be, whether it be just swimming or biking or a light jog or escalating density training, things like that will help with aerobic capacity, but it's also kind of like a buffer, and it helps with blood flow and helps with being able to understand how to, get recovery. You know what I'm saying? So once that happens, then we can keep on going. But I think I like the fact that we have that objective indicator, because at the end of the day, I don't want to have that problem.
Yeah, definitely. And just for the listeners, so I was saying about heart rate as a not a very good indicator. That's totally different from obviously HRV. They're two totally different things, two totally different numbers. So don't get them confused.
So like heart rate, I do like to check heart rate in the morning. Resting heart rate in the morning is a good indicator. I'm not saying that it's the end all be all, but if you don't have the means to get an HRV monitor, whether it be Bioforce or whatever the new one that he has out, what's it called again?
Apple Watch.
Morpheus.
Apple Watch. They're paying Dan now.
Yeah.
Apple Watch is paying Dan. Whatever the case may be.
Joel Jamison's new product is called Morpheus.
Yeah, Morpheus. Yeah, fucking. It reminds me. Yeah, so it's kind of just like The Matrix, but I get it. And The Matrix was a great movie, by the way. I love The Matrix, but but if you didn't have the means to get that, you can always get a baseline of your heart rate, resting heart rate in the morning, and if it does jump higher than 6 to 8 beats per minute, then something's going on. You know what I mean? So we got to make sure that we're auto-regulating after that. Also, grip strength is a key. If your grip strength is down in the morning, then that's obviously a telltale indicator that something's going wrong. So a dynamometer would be a good tool to use there as well. Also, as far as, overall, when you're assessing them in their movements, when they're doing the dynamic warm-up, if their coordination's off, if their balance off, if their timing and things like that are off. That's another indicator. And then also the VBT monitor, something that I love. With Gym Aware, we have the ability to get the velocity profiles, thanks to you, Dan. We plug that in, we get all that, calculated, and then I throw them on the VBT just to see how fast they're moving that bar. And if it's not as fast as they usually should, then we know we need to auto-regulate. That makes sense?
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, definitely.
So I know at the end of the day, like, there's so many ways to do it, but you just got to figure out what's going to work for you and your circumstances and your situations. Because I can do one thing, and all things work, unless it's just some asinine fucking, gimmicky tool. But all things do work if it's put in the right context. And
it's a place
that
for
probably
everything.
Yeah. I mean, people say this all the time, and my interns would tell me, man, do you do this? Do you do that? And I'm like, yeah. How do you like this? How do you like that? I like it all. But I like it all in context of the individual and why it works for them. Because it don't matter if it's good or if it's not good. If it's good and I put it in the wrong context, it's shit. So I got to make sure that I know exactly who needs it, why it's needed, and then when and where to put it in place.